I don't know if you remember that when I first talked about mindfulness, I mentioned that it isn't as though we were being mindful without a context, that we are offered in this practice of liberation 3 particular contexts which direct or support the mind's orientation in the awareness and the bearing witness to what's happening. And I mentioned 2 of them a little more than the third. These 3 aspects the Buddha names, and one he emphasizes, or the teachers of liberation emphasize these 3 aspects and name them as the 3 characteristics of life. It's very equivalent to understanding that there is gravity, and that gravity is one of the core expressions of this whole universe, for example. Or that there's clouds of what we call electrons that circle around the nucleus of every cell or every atom. Well, I mean every atom. And so there are these basic laws that are fundamental to the physical universe, and there are fundamental laws that are intrinsic to this practice of liberation. And I've mentioned the one which is that we are interconnected, that there is no such thing as any part of life that is isolated and disconnected from the other parts, that we're fundamentally in relationship to each other and not separate entities, and not just us as human beings, but all of life. There's no aspect of life that is separate from the rest of life. And this is called in Pali anatta, that we are empty of separation, we are empty of separateness, and we are full of interconnectedness or relatedness when the misunderstanding and confusion about being separate falls away. And then I mentioned, whenever I did, the unsatisfactoriness of all things, that there is nothing in life that stays satisfactory or perfect or pleasant. That the nature of the way life is constituted, just like nature. There's volcanoes, just naturally, there are volcanoes sometimes. Sometimes there's an earthquake and there are tidal waves, that there is how things are constituted is that they're never always in perfect balance and harmony all the time. And really another way of saying this is that all things are changing all the time, that there isn't anything that is outside the law of change or impermanence, that all of life is a flow, just like a river is always flowing, or anything is changing. And so I wanted to read 2 descriptions of the change in the core foundational written down teachings of this practice is what's called the 4 foundations of mindfulness that Booker and Ian and I have been using in our early morning talks, as this is what is to learn about mindfulness. And in this foundational teaching of what are called the suttas, or the written down teachings, this is what is said. We abide contemplating the body in its arising factors, breath coming and going, sensations coming and going, thoughts coming and going. We abide contemplating the body in its vanishing factors, or we abide contemplating the body in its arising and vanishing factors. That is how a practitioner abides contemplating or being mindful of the body as a body. We not only are mindful of what is happening, we are mindful with the lens that this breath, or this sensation, this sound, this thought has arisen. And even if we think the thought again, it has a beginning and it has an end. And everything has a beginning and an end. Absolutely everything in life. There isn't anything in life that's eternal. And even the physicists now say that there was something before the Big Bang. That is to say that there is a constant arising and passing away of everything. And that the ways that we feel separate and in suffering are because we haven't understood that because we are part of a larger family of life, because we are, there is this change that's happening all the time that is the expression of life. It isn't just us personally, but that because we are more than how we feel about ourselves mostly, and because we are more than how our bodies feel mostly, and certainly our hearts and minds, then in that moreness automatically comes, or can come, or is part of understanding, oh, just like the river flows or the ocean has its rhythms of waves crashing onto the beach and then receding, and crashing onto the beach and then receding, or a bird flying and then coming back, or flowers growing and dying. I am part of that rhythm and cycle. And that the experience of coming home is not actually the experience of coming home to a solid entity, myself, because that misunderstanding or ignorance ends up being deeply isolating and lonely, and calls us into the dynamics of inadequacy and insufficiency that the Buddha spoke about. But when we come home to being part of life and part of nature, then in that relationship, in the interconnectedness, also is the openness to the lived experience of change. And that opening to it can be profoundly liberating. That is, it becomes the condition for entering nirvana, or the mind and space that experientially communicates to us we are not a solid separate self, that we are so much more than that. And that what calls us to this practice is that homing calling, like a pigeon, not just to, not to belittle mindfulness at all, but mindful of the reality as it is. And as we open to it deeply through the practice of love and mindfulness, what's called the 7 factors, the 7 energies come into being. The mind, heart energies come into being and balance, and I'll talk about them tonight maybe, in a way like this. And that coming together and interlocking breaks open anything habitual. It's like a chicken cracking open from the egg. I love that image in our email or in our text, that you can click on that chicken. Like, it's like this, coming out of the egg. I love that image, because it's like, yeah, me breaking the shell of habitual energies. Here I am. So that's living inside of us, where and as we deepen in the practice, it becomes clearer to us. It's like what was confusing and a little foggy sometimes, of why am I here? What the hell am I doing? Which, often, like, especially when I was on a self-retreat, I did 3 months alone at home, probably about, 20 years ago now, or maybe 15, something like that. And I didn't see anyone for 3 months. And sometimes I'd be like, what am I doing? So there are those moments. And then and it wasn't clear in that very moment. And then something, just to this moment. And as that knowing here, breath, knowing, then it's not just breath, but the characteristic of breath, or sensations or sounds or any experience. It's not that I'm knowing it, it's that it is arising. And it is, the Buddha used the word vanishing, it is disappearing. And that is actually a law of every part of my experience. A thought, even a feeling that we feel like sometimes. It's so great when I notice us saying always, like it's always like this. And then I'm like, well, that is definitely a triggered space, because it's triggered spaces that say always. It's never present. Because when we're present, there's no always. Like present in the general understanding of what's happening. So it is scary sometimes to hear it. It's scary to name it, because the part of us that feels like if we don't hang on to the self-enclosure of ourself, like this is me, this is mine, you can't have it, then we're going to die. I totally get that feeling. Wow. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. It's scary. And this is a fear I can honor but not believe. Because if I let go of that selfing, of that ownership of myself as me and mine, I am creating the conditions of liberation. And then just to name it culturally, like, there's this meeting happening amongst many, not all, world leaders, the people who are in power, those world leaders. There are hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating around climate change. And indigenous leaders aren't being invited into the decision-making process, even though, of course, they're in the forefront of climate change. Why? Why? Because the people in power feel like what they have, they own. And when we experience that ourselves, this body is mine. This whatever I have is me and mine. That shuts us down from caring, from feeling connected to other beings. And so they can make those decisions without even knowing they are cut off from caring about people who we care about. And when I, in my Dharma talk, talked about privilege, wherever we're in a privileged location, if it's our age, we're in the right age, or if we have enough food and shelter and water to survive, for example, we are acting that out until we bring awareness to that selfing. Because selfing automatically happens unless there's awareness and mindfulness. That's why mindfulness is key to the liberation, because mindfulness shows us where that's happening. And as it shows us, we get to experience, oh my God, I'm not caring for that person. They're just words or numbers or beings that are like separate from me. They're separate from me. And the selfing not only shuts other people out, it shuts us out of our own heart of love. The more we own and self, like this experience is mine, I'm having it, as against this is what's arising and it's part of nature. And there's a particular pattern of nature expressing itself that I name as Arinna. I was called Linda by my parents. But I wanted to rename myself and access a larger lineage of ancestry than Linda. So I read this book called When God Was a Woman, and there was this goddess of all well-being, good crops, good births, good health, happiness. I'm like, Arinna. My mother called me Arinna until she died. So knowing these three characteristics and laws of life become the grounds of our liberation and freedom. And I don't just mean personally, you can tell, because it's so deeply, when it's contextualized in the ways that we all contextualize it, it's liberating for everyone. Because everyone is brought into our hearts in ways that counteract habitual ways of being, that cut people off according to conditioning. And then so I want to say, we have this capacity. We don't know when it'll be realized, but we have this. Each one of us here, we have it. And it is a deeply sacred path, because it's a path that brings that kind of relationship and ongoing expression into being in our inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. We have it. So it's like moment after moment, hi, how can I be present over and over again with the general comprehension, that's the word the Buddha uses, with this understanding of these laws, and that in inhabiting them, in knowing them over and over again, oh, this is changing, oh, this is changing. It clicks in like pieces of a puzzle, and you get the picture. Oh, that's the picture. And that sense of, yeah, of course. Like, in a way I knew it, no big deal. In a way, like, yeah, this is exactly what feels deeply resonant. So that picture, all the pieces of the puzzle come together and you're like, this is it. This is the picture. This is what it means to know not just separate pieces of life living through us, but how it can come into this coherent, discernible set of relationships, because we can understand it clearly, know it clearly, the whole picture. And so that's the vision of the invitation to us, of all our awakened ancestors. I've touched this place, they're saying to us. Here is what enabled me to do it. It's accessible to every human being who wants to try. And it's not like I have to slog and slog and slog, and only when I get there will I feel something. Every moment is changing something neurologically in our being. And those of us who've been practicing for a while can say that it culminates, the culmination of, for me, the biggest, reflection is that I used to harm with impunity, and now I don't. That I cannot. It's like a force that says, no, you can't do that, Arinna. You cannot say that. Even if you're pissed, you have to wait. Like just that force of caring. And that's like, wow, that's paying, that's being mindful through thick and thin over the years, that creates that force of, I can't harm anymore. Knowingly, anyway. Of course, I'm harming unknowingly, but knowingly, like, yeah, I don't care. I know I shouldn't do this, but I don't care. That doesn't happen anymore. So, okay. So let's try it on, see how it feels. So not like, oh, now I'm going to gear myself up to notice my breath, but more, can I relax? Can I entrust myself to whatever my liberated ancestors are inviting me to? Can I trust that? Just as a beginning, can I trust what they're saying, or what Arinna is saying, or what others have said? Can I trust that? And can I relax into it? So not necessarily doing anything. Just like, hi, here you are as you are, just for a moment. Or let me give you space, let me, in a relax and give you space life to live. Just like we're weeding out anything that doesn't allow for space in our garden. Let me give you space for you, life, whatever name you like to name yourself, your particular unique expression of life. Hi. How are you? But not then resting in the thought, but letting your body tell you, so giving your body space. And you're not coming close in to listen or know the experience, but relaxing, letting it happen. You've offered that intention, and you can offer it again if you want. I want you to know I'm interested and care to know how you are, and then let go of the concept and let go of any wanting an answer, turning towards some place on it. Just answer, let it go totally, and come to some place that's neutral. Whatever that place is, elbows, ears, lobes, feet. And we can relax because we know we've set this beautiful intention. Or maybe it's neutral to feel the touch of cloth against your skin. Keeping open. And in this openness, in the background is not only wanting to listen to what our body's communicating, to understand that what's arising is universal, part of the bigger force of life. And then see how that is expressed. So not my pain, but life expressing constriction. And I'm listening to it. Because it's life. Or it could be breath or sound. It could just be one in-breath at a time, and how it comes out of that great emptiness, that potential for all expressions of life coming into being. How life came out of the Big Bang, or the very first part of it. That, and then how the out breath comes and goes. Or sounds come and go. Relaxing, not trying to get somewhere, just hearing the words is enough. Life is always going to happen until we die, so we can relax. It's always coming, arising into being and falling away. Or it might be you're in a thought now and that's come, and several have already come and gone, arising and passing away. or it might be emotions arising and passing away. relaxed, connected to your knowing, or placing near. Witnessing how life is living. How it's changing. Thank you.